Hello everyone. Welcome back to Inner Spark, the place where stories ignite your motivation and keep your dreams alive. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, tap the bell icon, and hit that like button so you never miss a moment of inspiration. Today's story is about a humble farmer who faced droughts, floods, pests, and endless failures, but never gave up. It's the story of how one man's determination transformed barren soil into thriving fields, and how his persistence inspired an entire community to rise with him. If you've ever thought of giving up on your dreams, this will remind you why you shouldn't. In a quiet countryside village, far from the noise of the city, lived a farmer named Thomas. He had inherited a tiny piece of land from his late father, a patch so small that many said it could never feed a family, let alone make a living. The soil was dry and cracked, his tools were old and rusted, and the weather seemed to shift against him at the worst times. Yet Thomas carried a dream in his heart, to turn this dusty plot into the most fertile and respected farm in the region. The villagers laughed, thinking it was an impossible goal, but Thomas kept his head high, his hands busy, and his hope alive. In his first planting season, Thomas worked with boundless energy. He rose before the sun each day, pouring his heart into the soil, planting, watering, and tending with care. But halfway through, disaster struck. A relentless drought swept over the village, sucking every drop of moisture from the ground. His crops shriveled under the blazing sun, and by harvest time, he had nothing to show for his effort. Neighbors shook their heads, urging him to quit farming altogether and find work in town. But Thomas's belief in his dream was unshaken. He told himself, "This is only the first chapter, not the ending." Instead of abandoning the land, Thomas took the failure as a lesson. He began studying the patterns of the seasons, reading about farming methods, and speaking with older farmers who had survived hard years. Many brushed him off, some even mocked him for wasting his time. Still, he listened to every word, knowing that wisdom often comes hidden inside other people's struggles. Slowly, he realized that farming wasn't just about planting seeds, it was about timing, patience, and building resilience for whatever nature threw your way. The following year, Thomas tried again with renewed determination. But this time, it wasn't drought that tested him, it was flood. Heavy rains poured for weeks, turning his field into a shallow lake. The young crops drowned before they could even bloom, and his second harvest was ruined. With his savings gone and food running short, his friends and even family members told him to stop chasing this hopeless dream. Yet Thomas refused. Storms come to every farmer, he thought, but they don't last forever, and neither will mine. One quiet night, Thomas sat under the starry sky, staring at his land. He thought of his father, who had worked the same soil with his bare hands, never letting hardship defeat him. If he didn't quit, why should I? Thomas whispered to himself. That moment lit a fire inside him, a promise that no matter how many times the land tested him, he would rise to meet the challenge. He decided that from then on, his setbacks would be his teachers, not his enemies. With this mindset, Thomas began changing his approach. He stopped planting the same crops as everyone else, and instead researched plants that could survive droughts and withstand floods. He studied the benefits of crop rotation, learning how it restored soil health. Many of his neighbors doubted his strange choices, shaking their heads as he experimented. But Thomas was no longer planting just for today, was building for the future. Thomas also learned the importance of working smarter, not just harder. He continued his early morning routines in the fields, but in the afternoons, he could be found in the shade of an old tree, reading borrowed books about advanced farming techniques. He discovered that persistence without knowledge was nothing more than stubbornness. If he wanted to succeed, he needed both dedication and wisdom to guide his hands. In his third year, the results of his new approach began to show. Though not perfect, his harvest was better than before. He managed to produce enough crops to sell a modest amount at the market. For Thomas, this small victory felt like winning a great battle. It was proof that his changes were working. The coins he earned were reinvested into better seeds, and the hope in his heart grew stronger than ever. The whispers in the village began to change. Where there had been laughter and mockery, there was now quiet observation. People noticed that Thomas's fields looked greener, his plants healthier. Some of those who once mocked him now came to ask questions. Thomas didn't boast or hold back. He freely shared what he knew, believing that helping others grow only strengthened the community as a whole. But life wasn't done testing him. A swarm of locusts descended on the region, devouring crops in every field they touched. Farmers everywhere watched helplessly as their harvests vanished. Yet Thomas's careful planning saved him. He had planted trap crops along the borders of his land, luring the pests away from his main fields. While others lost everything, Thomas managed to save most of his harvest. This was the turning point. Respect replaced doubt, and people began to see him as a leader. As Thomas reflected, he realized something profound. Every failure had been preparing him for this moment. Without the drought, he would never have learned irrigation. Without the floods, he wouldn't have mastered soil drainage. Without the locust threat, he wouldn't have discovered pest control strategies. Every setback, though painful, had been a disguised blessing. Over time, his farm flourished. With each successful season, Thomas bought small neighboring plots of land until his once tiny patch had grown into sprawling fields stretching across the valley. He hired local workers, paid them fairly, and treated them with the kindness he wished he had been shown in his early struggles. His farm was no longer just a business. It was a lifeline for many families. His success didn't make him selfish. Thomas began hosting free workshops for other farmers, teaching them how to improve their yields and protect their crops. He believed that knowledge was a seed that should be planted in as many minds as possible. The more people succeeded, the stronger and more united the village became. One day, the mayor visited the farm and presented Thomas with the Pride of the Village medal. The gathered crowd applauded as Thomas stood humbly before them. "This medal," he said, "isn't just for me. It's for anyone who refuses to quit when life gets hard. It's for those who keep planting even when the soil seems barren." Years passed, and Thomas still worked the land, though now with more help and better tools. Bad seasons still came, but he faced them calmly, knowing that each one would pass. He taught young farmers the same lessons he had learned, that life, like farming, is a cycle. You plant, you wait, you endure, and you trust the process. He often told them, a seed doesn't grow in a day, and neither does success. But if you water it daily with effort, protect it with hope, and shield it from doubt, it will one day bloom. His words spread beyond the village, reaching farmers and dreamers in distant towns. As the years went on, Thomas passed his knowledge and his values to his children. He taught them not only how to care for crops, but also how to care for people. His legacy was no longer just a farm, it was a philosophy of life, rooted in resilience, kindness, and unshakable determination. Under Thomas's guidance, the village transformed completely. Once a struggling patch of countryside, it became known as a hub of rich harvests and skilled farmers. Traders traveled from far away to buy their produce, bringing prosperity that touched every home. One quiet evening, Thomas sat on his porch, watching the sun set over his thriving fields. He remembered the early days, the cracked soil, the failed harvests, the hunger, and the doubts cast by others. If he had listened to them and quit, none of this would have happened. Gratitude filled his heart, not just for the successes, but for every hardship that shaped the man he had become. And so, the farmer who refused to quit became a living symbol in his village. His life proved that success is never built in comfort. It is forged in the moments when you want to give up, but keep moving forward. No matter how many times you fall, what matters most is that you rise again. And that, dear friends, is your reminder from Inner Spark today. Every challenge is a seed, and if you tend to it with patience, hard work, and faith, it will one day grow into your greatest harvest.